Greetings, everyone. First, I'd like to say thank you for inviting me to Mi'kmaq territory. What we say in Mohawk, I come from the Mohawk community of Akwesasne. My community is 20,000 strong there. The community that I live in is half is in the state of New York and half is in Canada. The Canadian side, half is in Ontario, half is in Quebec. So it's quite the challenge when it comes to geography. I did 27 years of policing in my own community. My bio is a little bit outdated. I'm in my 34th year currently of policing. And I got to echo what was said. It's kind of hard to follow John. I just got one comment to John, and I don't see him in the room. Can you, as you can see, I'm trying to grow my hair out too. So. Whenever I get up and speak to other First Nations, I like to say Watkonwaratos. And what that means is usually we say Watkonwaratos takatisos, that I'm giving thanks to the Creator. But when I talk to other people and I say that, it means I'm bringing greetings, I'm bringing love to all of you. So thank you very much. I want to talk about the resilience of First Nation police officers in Canada. I'm the president of the First Nation Chiefs of Police Association, which means that we have 36 standalone First Nation police services in Canada, and we police over 156 First Nation communities. But that's 156 First Nation communities out of over 600 First Nation communities in Canada. So there's a considerable amount of First Nation communities that are either policed by a municipality, the provincial services, or the RCMP. But there are still well over 150 First Nation communities that don't have adequate policing or an adequate police response. We've seen that recently in the last couple of years at James Smith Cree First Nation and what happened there and the tragedies that happened there and how long that tragedy took place before an adequate police response was made. And that's uncalled for in First Nation policing, or in First Nation communities. We all live in Canada, and in Canada they have the Charter of Rights. And in the Charter of Rights, it says every person in Canada has the right for safety and security. Well, where's the safety and security for our First Nation people? Where's the adequate safety that police can respond when there's a crisis going on in our communities? So that's one of the things that I do, is I advocate for First Nation communities, not only the ones that we police, but also the ones that don't have police, because all of our First Nations deserve the same safety and security. So this is a picture of our First Nation chiefs. We just had an annual general conference, and we have 2 conferences a year. And this last conference, what we did was we recognize, at least once a year, we recognize our First Nation officers, both for longevity, for community service, for bravery, for determination, and for resilience, for being in for policing their own communities. So we have 36 self-administered First Nation policing in Canada currently. We have over 1,400 officers that police these communities. So we police 156 First Nation communities in Canada. In Ontario, there's 160 First Nation communities. There's 9 standalone police services, First Nation police services in Ontario. We only police 86 of it. So even in Ontario, where we have a large and big police services in First Nations, we still don't police all of the communities. And Ontario is one of the provinces that has a provincial police services, and they're responsible for policing most of those communities. But there are still communities that don't allow an outside police services or a provincial police service or even the RCMP within their communities, because of the colonialism and what happened to them and the past history that outside police services has within the communities. Predominantly the Iroquois communities, they don't allow outside police services. Unless you're a First Nation police service, they don't allow you to come in. So there's different models of policing in Canada. You have the RCMP as the national police, you have the provincial police services, the Sûreté de Quebec, and you have the Ontario Provincial Police. Ontario and Quebec are the only provinces that have provincial police services. Then you have municipal police services, such as the major cities of Toronto, Montreal, Calgary, Vancouver. And then you have First Nation police services. Every police service in Canada has a legislative backing, except for First Nation police services. So what does that mean? That means we're not an essential service. We're not classified as essential service. Yet if somebody's in crisis in our community, who are they going to call? They're going to call the police. So you would think we're essential, but we're not. During the ice storms and during COVID, they closed everything down. LCBO was an essential service as classified by the government. Policing, First Nation policing wasn't. So that's one of the things that I do as the president of the association is I lobby for our services. Not only do I lobby for the legislation to come into fruition, but you know what? Prime Minister Trudeau gave Minister Blair, when he was a public safety minister, a mandate letter. And in that mandate letter, he told him, we want First Nation police services to become essential. Make the legislation happen. We're in our 4th Minister of Public Safety tenure, and that has not happened yet. What's the holdup? Why aren't First Nation police services essential in our communities? Are they saying that our communities don't deserve the safety and security that everybody else in Canada takes for granted? The model of policing in First Nation, the current model of policing in First Nation began in 1991. In 1991, the First Nation policing program started. But that doesn't mean that First Nation policing started in 1991. Some police services started, have been celebrating almost 60 years of policing their own communities. Kahnawake has celebrated 57 years policing their community. Akwesasne just celebrated 50 years. So First Nation policing has been around a long time, but the current model of policing started in 1991. In 1991, when they started standalone First Nation police services, they started with 58. So 58 communities, or 58 police services, police First Nation communities across Canada. Within the first 3 years, that fell considerably. Now we're at 36. And there has been no expansion in the First Nation policing program. So none of our communities in Canada, First Nation communities in Canada, have expanded to a police service since 1994 was the last one. So Canada has determined that they're not going to put resources into First Nation communities for their own police services. And yet, all the studies that have been done indicates that when you police your own community, you get more trust, more professional, and you get better service. In every one of our First Nation policing contracts and policing agreements, it says that you must police your community with cultural sensitivity and cultural relevance. We do that because 60% of all of our officers are from the communities, either the community that they serve or else they police other First Nation communities. Why isn't that in every other police services across Canada's agreements, that they must provide culturally appropriate policing for all races, not only First Nations, but all races? But they put it in our agreement. Why? We do it anyways. Yep, go ahead.
I was just wondering about the psychology of the word police in culture, because
Right.
more administered and put down everything else that's negative. And maybe today the word police has to change to something that's more acceptable to indigenous cultures, along with the philosophy of what the police is doing within the society.
I totally agree. If you go to, there's over 160 First Nation languages in Canada. And if you go to those languages and you ask, okay, what's your word for policing? It'll come out as a derogatory word. It'll come out as a harsh word because our languages evolved way before policing was, and it was based upon the RCMP's interaction with our people. And even in my own language, Galito for police means the men of steel. There's no softness in the word. There's no softness in the word when it comes in relation to how they interact with our people. So I agree. Many police services, such as Ganawage, they don't have, their name isn't police. They call them peacekeepers.
I asked my uncle one time, I said, Uncle Roddy, I said, we never had police in our society. How do you see it? What's the concept of a police that you have? And he came up with a word, I think it was Najigula.
Right. Well, in First Nation policing, we're changing that. And we're changing that first within our service, because what it does is it comes from the strong leadership of our policing. And from the chiefs of police down in our First Nation communities, we are the true model of community policing. All other police services in Canada say they have a model of community policing. If you look at a First Nation community, it's the truest model of First Nation of community policing. And why do I say that? Because we're embedded into the community. We come to the community not to push our authority, not to exceed our authority, and not to create and follow the rule of law. We go into our communities where we participate in diversion programs. We participate in alternative measures. We go to ceremonies. We go to sunrise ceremonies. We're definitely part of the community. We teach our kids their programs. We're in the schools all the time. We go to community meetings. We answer to the community. The community are who we work for. The community are our boss, and that's where we take our direction for our policing. And if you look at the crime severity index, each year Canada does a crime severity index. So they go for every municipality and they determine how much crime is in that community. Violent crime, property crime, and then they put it on an index based on the severity of those crimes. First Nation communities across Canada has an average of 37% higher violent crime than other municipalities or other communities. But not once last year, there was over 10 people that died, First Nation people that died in Canada at the hands of police. Not once did that happen by a First Nation police officer in a First Nation community. So we have higher violent crimes in our community, but we deal with it effectively because we are part of the community. We know how to go into a situation and diffuse that situation. We know how to go into a situation and speak the language to them. And 90% of the time when we go in there and we speak the language, the anxiety comes right down.
I got a quick question.
Yep.
So let's say if there was an indigenous community that was policed by a non-indigenous policing unit, and they changed over to an indigenous policing unit, do you know that is there any change in those rates between the two police forces?
Well, that's one of the things that we have to push as police leaders and First Nations is that we're fighting. Our pension is a lot lower than municipalities or the mainstream policing. Our pay is a lot lower. In Quebec alone, the officers in First Nations get paid 37% less than their counterparts right next door. And that's what the leaders today in First Nations, they don't take things at status quo.
Yeah.
So we've had to resort to human rights complaints against Canada. Canada has at least 5 human rights complaints by communities or police associations from First Nations because of the pay inequity, because of the pension inequities. In Ontario, we're just settling our pension inequities because we took Ontario to court. Supreme Court of Canada recently had a decision based out of a Quebec court case of appeals that went to Supreme Court. And what they said was that Canada is not following the honor of the Crown. They're not following that duty to accommodate First Nations when it comes to the negotiations. And what they're saying, and also saying, is that First Nation communities are not funded in the same proportion or same manner as a neighboring community of certain size, police service of certain size. So they're discriminating against the First Nation.
Yeah.
So we're seeing that right across Canada.
It not only happens with police, and it happens with other professions. Like
Yeah.
But I've done proposals before, and one of the proposals that I've done before, one of the checkoffs on the proposal, this is a federal funding proposal. It asks whether if this position is going to be tax exempted or not. Now, that bothers me because if it is, will they give me the full amount of that? If it isn't, then they won't give me the full amount of that because
Right.
they'll take the income tax right off the top of it.
Right.
Just to get
And,
that back.
and that's what they were saying about policing too. You're employed on a reserve, so you're tax-free status. But they're holding that against us because that's a right. That has nothing to do with labor laws. That's a right that we have as First Nation people. So they're discriminating us against that. And they saw that in Ontario. We had to go to court. We did a human rights case against Ontario for the pay inequities, and we won. They found that it was discriminatory against us because they were discriminating against a right that we had as First Nation people. I might as well go into questions.
Great presentation.
Oh, I got one here.
I just started.
I know you mentioned the crime severity index, and I think one of the things that a lot of First Nations are struggling with when you mentioned the crime severity index is that they use a base population of 1,000 people.
Right.
And a lot of First Nations have a smaller population than that. But it costs, for instance, our community used StatsCan. StatsCan, according to them, we had 930 people in our community. So we couldn't use the crime severity index. If we had been able to use the crime severity index, I think we would have been able to employ 3 more police officers in community. Because of that, we funded out of our own source revenue an additional officer, but we're still shorthanded as far as policing numbers are concerned. And I think one of the things I guess I'm hoping that communities do now is that when StatsCan is pushing for population numbers, is that they encourage their community members to do the stats because it impacts funding. And when I asked the StatsCan person what the Millbrook's response to the stats were, they said we had a 20% non-responsive rate, which would have put us over the 1,000 person necessary to use the crime severity index, and they would have covered an additional three police officers in community. So I think a lot of First Nations, we have lots of First Nations, but they can't use the crime severity index.
You're absolutely right about that. There has to be a population of 1,000 people within the community before you can do this, before it goes to Stats Canada. But there's also other ways to increase your complement of officers. It's not always based on population, but it's also based on the amount of activity, the amount of people commuting through your territory. There's so many other factors that they take in place. In Public Safety Canada, over the last few years, we've been working with them on creating that kind of a mechanism on how to determine how many officers your community actually needs. So they've done that study. They won't release it on how they did it, but they'll come into your community and they'll assess that. So when the First Nation policing program,
So you spoke earlier about the essential services.
Yep.
Can you explain where that is now and your vision once that is implemented?
The essential service legislation is, we've been pushing it for many years for First Nation policing. It's currently at a standstill. There's been no progress over the last year. There was a lot of work that was done. Before you can create legislation, you have to create the principles of that legislation. And when they create the principles of the legislation, it sets the guideline on how the rest of the legislation is going to be implemented. When Minister Blair had the mandate for the legislation to be put forward, the government determined that there was going to be two co-developers, Public Safety Canada and AFN. When they got together, AFN had got some money together to do a cross-country inquiry and set up conferences on what the people wanted. And they they determined the leadership. They even spoke with policing. They spoke with different subject matter experts. And what they found was that the principles didn't coincide with each other. So Canada, Public Safety Canada and AFN, or the First Nation communities, couldn't come to an agreement on the basic principles of that legislation. AFN wanted jurisdiction because they wanted the legislation to be part of, kind of identical on how they did the child welfare legislation, where they had this, where it actually assumed total jurisdiction. So they want jurisdiction over policing. And if you look at current legislation that's in process now, policing is a provincial jurisdiction, falls under provincial jurisdictions. So that's where the conflict came in. Canada saw it that they can acknowledge First Nation rights, they can acknowledge UNDRIP, they can acknowledge everything else, but they cannot acknowledge total jurisdiction over policing to First Nation communities. And that's where that conflict came in place. But if you look at the recent justice report that came out, justice strategy that came out in March, public safety justice strategy at Canada's Publics on Aboriginal people, there's a lot in that document that says they want to work with First Nation peoples on jurisdiction, on inherent rights, on First Nation laws and bylaws. So they go so far, but they don't say they're going to give total jurisdiction of policing, of justice over to the communities. They say they will work with them, but they don't say how and how far it's going to go. So that's where that conflict is right now, and it's kind of at a stalemate.
That's always been the issue with jurisdiction, because we are policed by my community is policed by the federal RCMP.
Yeah.
Because we're federal, right? Mm-hmm. So that's easily done because they're federal. But they dig their heels when it comes to policing our own, with our own Indigenous police force, and then the funding gets taken away and everything. But yet they spend they have up to 16 police cars out in front of my detachment in Niskazoni. They spend money to have them housed in Sydney in a hotel because they don't, so they're doing all of that. It's costing them millions and millions of dollars. But the other thing is with bylaws, they refuse to enforce bylaws. They said it's not enforceable, but yet if you go down to a municipality and if you get a parking ticket from the bylaw officer, that parking ticket then gets sent to the provincial, and then it gets stuck on your license, and you got to pay that fine before you can do anything. So all that can be worked out, right? So, but So, are any of your First Nation police organization enforcing bylaws in indigenous communities?
Are enforceable. I'll give you an example in my home community of Akwesasne. Akwesasne has its own court system. They created their court system based on, they had the last justice of the peace that was sanctioned under the Indian Act in the community. And she helped create the justice system there. So Akwesasne has its own bylaws. They have up to 37 different bylaws. So they have the traffic bylaws there. So all traffic infractions that the police come upon are returnable to the reserve court. That bylaw, traffic bylaw, was written combining both the Ontario HTA, Highway Traffic Act, and New York State Penal Traffic Act. So they combined them because the territories covers both countries. Yeah. So they put it together, and they do enforce it. They also enforce about 37 kilometers of the St. Lawrence River. So they also have their own marine enforcement. So what happens is, if anybody in the community gets a traffic ticket, it's not reciprocal. They don't get points taken away. But if they refuse to pay their ticket, they also have a good standing policy on the reserve, that if you have any outstanding fines, any outstanding infractions that you haven't paid from the court, then you can't get services from the community. So they're payable to the community. And it works. Yeah. So there are examples of where it does work. But the problem with bylaws in other communities is there's nobody more frustrated than the police about the bylaws, because we can't enforce it. Because there is no prosecutorial location where we can have those bylaws returned that'll answer to it. I was talking to the Ministry of Attorney General in Ontario, and they acknowledge, yeah, provincial courts used to hear First Nation bylaws. And I said, well, why did it stop? He goes, because 9 times out of 10, if we get a bylaw infraction from First Nations, by the time it gets to the court date, they didn't show up, and we call back and say, okay, why didn't they show up? Because they determined it's already been settled within the community. And that's what we do as First Nation people. That's our diversion program. We make it more accountable, and we make that balance within the community. But they saw it as a deterrent. They saw it as, well, it's not working. Bylaws aren't working because it's not being brought here to our court system to be enforced. But it's being enforced. It's being worked out within the community. So that's kind of why it stopped in Ontario. And then right now they're trying to push it back. The Chiefs of Ontario have put in a human rights case against the Solicitor General's Office of Ontario for not including bylaw enforcement in their new Police Services Act. In the new Police Services Act, it specifically says all laws are to be enforced except for First Nation bylaws. So it specifically says in there. So Chiefs of Ontario actually put in a human rights complaint against Ontario. Yeah.
And I'm just sorry, I'm just going to add, Sagama, to the conversation. We really see this as a Section 35. It's a governance issue.
Right.
And so for those who don't know, the Assembly, what they did is they passed a resolution saying let's draw down jurisdictions with respects to justice issues, policing being one of them, and look at bringing that to the table. I know I was speaking with Dee yesterday saying, let's talk about how we can bring policing to our communities under our own governance system. So drawing down the jurisdiction that way. And it is federal land, so province could have some rules, but they don't apply to our communities. You guys know that. Everybody knows that. So it's a step in the direction. I'm really glad you're here, Sagamoto, just to have some ideas on what the options are, how we can build. But I don't want everybody to walk away thinking, well, it's something that can't be done, because we are going to be working on drawing down jurisdiction. We are going to be working on, and it's really up to each community on how you want to proceed. Just tell us, but right now we do have the directions from the Assembly to say, let's start getting this done. And this is why we're having the conference, to see what else is out there. What are the tools that we can use? And the strongest tool that we can use is the Constitution. So Section 35. You have a right, a constitutional right to governance. And I looked over to Vi, and I'm like, Vi, do I got this right? Always looking to our elders and our advisors to say, are we going down that right road? So I just wanted to add that when we hear that the province has some jurisdiction, let them police themselves, right? But with us, we need to, and I'm hearing from the communities, want to develop something that's very specific to our communities with a Mi'kmaq-centric view by the Mi'kmaq for the Mi'kmaq. So with that in mind, I'll just pass it back over, and I just want to remind everybody on timing. I don't want to rush you, because I know this is a very important conversation. We're going to ask the Sagama to say a little later if you guys would like to have one-on-one conversations. But yeah, so we're trying to get you back on an agenda, back on the schedule. We do have one more presenter. I'm sorry for that. Not sorry for the next presenter, but sorry for the timing. But just to remind everybody. And then we will have more conversations on that. So not cutting you short, going through, because I know we kind of hijacked your presentation a little bit, but it's all good discussions.
And I'm only on slide 4 of 56, so. So the First Nation Inuit and Policing Program started in 1991. We were set up to fail. Like I said, 58 started, First Nation Policing Services started. We're down to 36 now. We were set up to fail. All Canadians deserve the same level of adequate and effective policing. The officers that risk their lives to provide community safety also deserve comparable wages, benefits, backup, training, equipment, vehicles, and facilities. There should never be a have or have not for communities when it comes to public safety. There should never be, safety should not be one of those areas that the government scrimps and saves. In his release report of the Ipperwash inquiry in 2007, Honorable Sidnan referred to second-class funding and legal status according to First Nation Police Services. Yet 18 years later, we're in the same situation. So the importance of First Nation policing. We bring cultural policing and awareness to our organizational structure. And it comes from the top down, from the chief of police down. And I had the privilege of growing up in a traditional manner in our Mohawk territory. So I came with a strong belief of our traditions, our culture, our language, our history. And I implement that in a lot of the way we do our policing. So the priorities that we have in First Nation policing, a couple of the ways that we implement that is we all swear an oath on the eagle feather. We don't affirm. That's the way we say to the Creator that we're going to tell the truth, and we're going to be honest, we're going to be professional, and we're going to treat our people accordingly. We burn tobacco, we burn sage, we burn sweetgrass on a regular basis within our buildings, because we do bring a lot of those violence, those bad natures, those bad thinkings, those bad thoughts, comes into our building when we take people in custody. So we do that, a lot of the cleansing of our own, not only of our officers, but also our building. The condolence rights. I was at the panel, listening to the panel yesterday, and there was a discussion, and somebody brought up grief. What do we do in grief in our communities? I was at the local hospital one time, and I was picking up some records, and it was out of my jurisdiction. And I heard a commotion going on in the emergency room. So I walked over to the emergency room, and I saw a traditional family that was there. And what happened was they had brought a baby in that had died from SIDS. And according to the laws in Ontario at the time was every child that dies under a certain age had to have a full autopsy, had to have full examination, x-rays. And the police of jurisdiction were there trying to take the baby. And the traditional family didn't understand why, and they didn't understand giving up their baby when certain things needed to be done. In the tradition, there's a condolence ceremony that takes place, and words that have to be said to everybody who dies. And depending on how your status is in the community, depends on what words are being said. Because we have 11 wampums that we use when we go through our condolence ceremonies. Not all of the wampums are used for everybody. All 11 are used for chiefs. But if somebody dies for an infant, then certain wampums are used and certain words are said. And they couldn't fathom turning over their dead child to the police of jurisdiction. So I got involved, and they knew that I knew the words because whenever we had a condolence ceremonies and somebody would die in the community, our elders wouldn't translate those words to the family because some of our family's members don't speak English or don't speak Mohawk. They only speak English. So I would translate afterwards because the elders wouldn't do the translation because they felt that, they shouldn't have to translate those words. So I would do the translation afterwards to the families. So they knew I knew a lot of the culture and the traditions. They would only turn that baby over to me because they knew I would do the right thing. So that's the kind of things and there was another question that was asked yesterday, I believe, and it was about the times. Most of our band councils give 3 days when somebody dies. In my culture, it takes 10 days before that spirit can make their journey to the Creator. So there's 10 days of ceremonies that take place. And if I'm only given 3 days to grieve, well, that's completely wrong against my beliefs. So I would take the whole 10 days. There's also a ceremony that has to take place at a year time. So we have to acknowledge that. But it's these teachings that we come into our profession that other police officers from other communities, RCMP, certainly aren't aware of. They don't know how to deal with somebody who dies. They don't know how to deal with the family. They don't know the words that need to be spoken to them. They don't know how long that grieving process is and when you shouldn't go speak to the family, when it's not appropriate to do so. Only only in our First Nation police services do we teach that. Restorative justice. That's one of the biggest things too in our First Nation community is that we embrace restorative justice and diversion programs. We even have pre-charge programs. If we come across a youth that's causing graffiti in the community, we won't charge them right away. We'll send them to the diversion process because we have 6 months to lay a charge. And within that 6 months before we lay a charge, we're going to try to send this youth to diversion because we'd rather have that balance within the community than that youth getting a criminal record. When somebody gets charged by the police officers and they go to the criminal court, 9 times out of the 10, the victim doesn't have a say when it gets to the court process. Sure, they can do a victim impact statement, but most of the time it doesn't get read to the courts. When we go through a diversion process or an alternative measures progress or an elders council, that balance is restored because not only does the victim have a chance to say, but it also, the community has a chance to say how that graffiti affected everybody else. So it kind of restores that balance. And as a police leader, I'd rather have a well-balanced community than the stats. And that's the difference between First Nation policing and mainstream policing. So as First Nation leaders, we come into our police services and we restructure our police service based on our vision on community. And our vision does come from the community because we are a true community police model. So we get involved in the traditions, the restorative justice practices, the different ceremonies that take place. We are there. We are making sure that we are part of it. We are embedded into the community. Missing and Murdered Aboriginal Women Day, Red Shirt Day, Red Dress Day. We get totally involved. We change our uniforms for the day. Respect, humility. This is a drum group from my police service. My police service has an actual traditional drum group that they go around, and when I'm the president of the First Nation Chiefs Police Association, we put on 2 conferences a year. Most times I bring them to sing and open up in a good way. Go ahead.
I apologize.
No.
Is this working? First, I'm scared if I hold it, I'll lose the.
The thought.
I don't trust myself when we're trying to put up. So my main question, I seen your previous slide, and it's a good list, right? Now my question to that is, Ontario is a big place. And I don't know, your experience, I don't know how many different tribes you work with, different languages, right?
Yeah.
Commonality, right, from all those tribes, the language law. Are you familiar, like,
Yep.
because here, elders tell us, Ilnu law, right? And it's in our language. And that was for thousands of years. And now with this, well, you know the history, I don't have to tell you, you know all about it being police, you have to deal with it all. But the struggle is the 2 worlds. And what our elder here says, 2 I see him. But the values in our culture for thousands of years is still with us. And a lot of people still, we within our language, our laws. And I see all the elders balance and restorative justice and all that. I don't know, this is the question before I forget. In all those languages, do they have a word for guilty in your language? In all those languages you deal with?
I actually don't know any words of guilty.
There's no
In
word?
in my language, the Mohawk language, there's many words that don't have meanings.
So
There's-
in your
there's many
language-
ways I can't.
What's the nearest thing for guilty?
I can't even think of one. That comes up to guilty.
But you know what I'm saying, right? There
Yeah.
was no word. And the law for replacing that, in this territory, Mi'kmaq, right?
Yeah.
We have a word that the closest thing to guilt is gokhwajadan. Setting things right to all these circle elders representing what they perceive as what person has to go through to set things right, right? So that's the word in here in our Mi'kmaq is gokhwajadan, meaning setting things right.
Right.
And there's no word for guilty. I just wanted to bring that up. And then how do we fix all the injustice? Like, as Grand Chief, right? 6 years, in my going on 6 years, I could imagine your 29 years, what you had to go through. But as Grand Chief for 26 years, a lot of things happen in this area, in the Mi'kmaq. We had 2 recently First Nation people got killed on a wellness check. And they're everybody was coming after me. Just like, Grandchief, we need to address that. And then you talked about bylaws. Again, in our area, Mi'kma'ki, one woman was badly, he was killed in the hands of people who were supposed to be, they did a BCR to keep those individuals out, but some reason it wasn't enforced. As a result, this lady in the hands of this person got killed. And the community was up in arms, and they were reaching out to me about trying to find some kind of way to keep protection. Because the role Grand Council plays is keeping our faith and also protecting the nation. And it's a big, broad scope of definition, but everything comes to me as a leader for our nation regarding everything that the pulse of our nation, and what Janice was saying, this is the true way of elders say we have to do our own. Yesterday I mentioned that having a strong faith, my grandfather said, and our Ilnu medicine. Ilnu medicine is how we heal each other, right? And we have to have strong Ilnu medicine. We can't, the clonistic way and with medication and all that, we need to heal. And when he said our nation is rich if our nation is healthy. And again, there's a big broad definition of what, and without us getting out of this tight control of the federal government or Indian Act, it's very controlling. And I know it is off from when it was first introduced, but still we have to abide whatever the, because our people need to be doing what they're supposed to do. That was my grandfather's defense when we signed those treaties. He said, allowing us to do what we were doing prior to arrival. So this is just a touch area. I don't want to take up your presentation. I know we're running late. Well, Ollie, thank you.
I was talking to an elder one time, and we're talking about laws. We're talking about policing, and we talk about order before police was ever brought to our nations. And I said, how did we manage those people that were doing harm against ourselves? And he says, you know what? He goes, we had banishment back then. He goes, but the ideal of banishment wasn't the same as back then as it was today. You can create banishment bylaws. You can create banishment laws within your communities. He goes, but in our culture, he goes, well, the true meaning of banishment was when we're born, our names came from our clans, which came from our mothers because we're matrilineal. So when we banish people, we take their names away. The clans pull their names back away so that their name is never spoken in the community again. So if they're dressing, if the person's in the community, you don't speak to them by their name. And what that means is that in our community is that they would take them from the band rolls, they would take them from the services, so they would no longer get those services from the community. And they would ultimately ban them. So that's how they would do back then. So I'll jump back in. Okay. Yeah. All right. So one of the questions yesterday too was, what kind of training would you instill in police services, not only First Nation Police Service, but other First Nations? Well, culturally sensitive training for other police services, trauma-informed training. We are living in communities that are going through intergenerational traumas. Some of our police officers are going through the same trauma or have lived the trauma because their parents, their grandparents have gone through the residential school system and all that. So we have to understand that, and we have to police in that way with that understanding. Our police officers, we did a mental health survey in 2021. 26 of our standalone police services don't have enough ammunition training for work. 60% of our officers are First Nations and police in their own community. That's a big stress upon themselves, policing your own community. I did it for 27 years. 25% don't have reliable internet. These are just some of the most recent stats. 38% of our First Nation communities are isolated. 11% of them don't have 12 months out of the year road access. 54% of our First Nation officers have salary levels that are below standard. "57% of the members of our police services, because we have 37 higher violent crime in our communities, during the course of employment have experienced a mental health issue. Some of the current issues, essential service legislation, the stalling of that, and what that relates, how that feels upon our officers. We get funding agreements, policing agreements between 1 to 5 years. I'm on my third one-year extension. How can I recruit an officer in my police service and say, I'm going to give you a career in First Nation policing when I only have 1 year policing agreement? We can't, because of the most recent current case laws. My board wants to wait until they kind of settle down before they go into long service. Public Safety Canada wouldn't give longevity. The essential service legislation, when it comes into fluid, will provide sustainable funding for First Nation police services, longevity funding, long-term funding. Right now, we're funded by a program. Programs are only up to 5 years in length. They don't have sustainable longevity funding, so that's why. So bringing back the balance to our officers, I have to commend our officers and the resiliency of them, because we don't have the retention issues that most other police services have. Even though we have less pension, less pay, higher violent crimes, our officers aren't leaving us. The only time they leave us is because they're getting recruited by other police services because of pension and pay. But they'd rather stay in our communities. They'd rather stay and do the community policing model that we provide. We provide trauma-informed training, and we implement that. One of the biggest pluses that I have implemented in my service is a mobile crisis response team. This is a social worker that actually responds with the officers when there's somebody in crisis, somebody in distress in the community. They know how to alleviate that and bring that level of that person down before they actually commit a crime. Because in their anxiety and their high level of anxiety, they're more apt to create violence, they're more apt to create a crime, participate in a crime. But we have trained people that respond traditionally and bring that level down. And it's brought the recidivism of dealing with that person to the level that's been really low. So we're being balanced between tradition and modern policing. We're integrated into the community with our model of policing. Our consensus input. We get consensus from the community on what kind of policing they want us to provide to them. We don't go in there and say, this is how we're going to police you. There are certain areas where traditions may conflict with policing standards. Well, we work through that. So accommodate, like I told you, deaths, I give you an example. Privacy. There are certain ceremonies that we have taken place in our First Nation communities, but our police officers wear body-worn cameras. We tell them, you are not allowed to have those cameras on during these times, in these places, these locations. Smudge, sweetgrass, sage, that's a safe space for us. We create outside spaces for our officers and our members so that they can go decompress. We provide places like this for victim interviews, so that they can feel comfortable. They're not closed in a confined location with a camera stuck in their face. We provide decompression and stress management for our officers, our board, our staff. We even open it up to the community. That was the last 15 slides real quick. I do have to say one more thing too. I know you guys are policed by the RCMP in this jurisdiction, in this province. I also sit on the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police as a vice president. I'm the first First Nation police chief in the history of that organization to sit as a vice president of the association. So if you have issues within this area, please forward them to me. I can address it nationally.
I always say I have a job to do as an MC, and I really hesitate and hate to, speed up your presentation, but we do have other presenters coming up. What you spoke about just now is something that's on the top radar as leaders in our communities who face so many different scenarios and situations where we often feel that we don't have the support of the RCMP or whoever polices our communities. And a lot of things that happen are extremely traumatic, and it falls on the shoulders of leaders, and it's not fair. But in saying that, I want to thank you for your presentation and the information and the knowledge that you provided. I was just whispering to Janice, gives us such hope as a former leader, and to all the leaders, the chief and councils, and to the grand council in the room, and anybody who works in our communities on the front line. You're giving us a lot of hope here today. So I want to thank you for that. And on behalf of the Assembly of Nova Scotia Mi'kmaq Chiefs, I have a small gift for you, and it comes from the heart, and it's a smudge kiss. Yeah, and I just got to let you know, Chief Jerry will be here, and he'll be able to take your questions on the side, or you can sit and talk to Chief. You're going to be here.
I'll be signing John's book.
There you go. He'll be signing John. He'll be available for questions. He'll be in the room. So I'm going to call up Janice now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Swamp. That was a lot of really good information and gives us, like Annie said, some hope and some food for thought. We've heard a lot about policing the last couple of days. We heard a lot about governance, or I know I've been talking a lot about governance. So when we look at this and we look at building towards a stronger tomorrow, we look at the short, medium, and long term. What can we do right now? And I'm going to say the next presenter, maybe this is something that we could think about, right? The next presenter will talk really what HRM is doing around wellness checks. Then I looked to Chief Swamp here on the policing, and I'm thinking, well, is that something we can work at in the medium term? It's something that would take much more planning, more thinking in the communities, and what do you want to do? What will work in your communities? And then giving us the directions if it's us that you choose to work with on that and building that, or if you work directly with Chief Swamp and his team. So short, medium, long term, building for a better tomorrow. But so let's go to the last presentation of the day. We have, and I'm sorry, I'm just going to look to the group to come up, if you can, please, as I call you out. So we have Dr. Del Bello, Kara Evans, and Ashton Stevens, who will be here to talk about the soon-to-launch Civilian Crisis Response Pilot Project. I'm going to provide a short bio for each of them. So DeBello is a social policy strategist with the Halifax Regional Municipality. municipality's Community Safety Office. With over 15 years of experience in the public and adolescents' health, Dell focuses on creating a community-led cultural response alternatives to traditional crisis response system. That was a hard one to say. Sorry, I was like, whoa. Particularly for people who have impacted by substance abuse, homelessness, and mental health challenges. She is joined by Ashton Stevens. Ashton? Who is the manager of the outreach services in HRM, working with Community Safety Division as part of the housing and homeless team. With over 10 years of experience, Ashton has dedicated his career to supporting marginalized populations, such as people facing racial discrimination, poverty, homelessness, mental health challenges, and addictions and other related barriers. Our third guest is Kara Evans. Kara? Kara, the coordinator of the community with HRM. With almost 17 years of experience in HRM, Kara has dedicated her career to building partnerships centered on the advancing public safety and community resilience. From coordinating emergency responses during the 2023 wildfires to somebody help me, modernizing, making more modern, policing policies, and providing dispatch systems. Kara is committed to practical exclusiveness and collaborative solutions. Long couple of days, and thank you for being tough and staying with us for the third day, and looking forward to this presentation as it's a pilot project with respects to wellness checks. So we know that we are challenged with that. So I'd like to hear what other people are doing and thinking about what can we build specific to our community. So welcome, team. And I don't know if you're each going to come to the podium or if we want a few mics up here just to make it easier for everyone, please.
Thank you so much. There you go, Kara. Yeah, I will. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you.
I'm okay right now.
Good morning, everyone. We are glad to be here today to present to you the community crisis diversion model being developed by the Halifax Regional Municipality. And as introduced, my name is Dele Bello. I'm a social policy strategist within the public safety business unit in the Halifax Regional Municipality, and my colleagues are here with me. So I'll start with providing a bit of a context to the community crisis diversion model that is being developed. So the crisis diversion, several global and local events and recommendations have highlighted the need for increased community crisis response as an alternative to police interventions within the community. Police interventions it's been recommended or it's been heard that should be reserved for emergency services, emergency needs, and criminal needs, while non-police response are developed for non-emergent and non-criminal events. One of such is the HRM Defund the Police report that highlights the need to divert more non-emergent calls from police, and also the mass casualty commissions that highlight several areas that are related to intimate partner violence and the gender-based violence crisis response team. And it's on this foundation that the community crisis model is being developed. And this is what is developed as a broader spectrum of response to social issues and harms within the community. And the mandate is that it will be able to provide immediate and round-the-clock response, in-person support to individuals that are experiencing crisis with the aim of stabilizing the situation and better connect them with appropriate resources which may not be available through the police. So I'll take us through the approach that we are taking in developing this model to where we are today.
I just want to, just checking the mic. Hello? Hello. So, sorry, Del.
It's okay.
We're hearing that there's some chatter, so I've been asked just to make sure everybody, I know it's important conversation. Keep your chatter to a minimum, please, while we have a presenter. Sorry.
No worries, thank you. Okay, so I want to give us a background or briefly explain the approach that has been taken in developing the model up to where we are today. First, we had what I will call exploration, and this involved activities around environmental scan, looking into other provinces and other geographical locations where things like this is being done and the impact, how it is designed, who are the responders, what kind of situations, crisis situations do they respond to, how do they respond, and what had been the results of the response. Also, we did get data gathering and analysis. We took data from the police to understand what are the various crises, non-emergent crises that police respond to, and which ones have the potentials of being diverted, to be responded to by community organizations other than the police. And also, the data also showed us where these crises take place, the frequency, what time of the day, what time of the week, and also like what's the volume of the crisis, and how can the community benefit from responses from this crisis as being diverted to another community organization to respond to these ones. And then we also sought to understand different intake and response dispatch system. So after the exploration, we then did engagements to talk to various service providers to understand what they do, how they do it, how there could be collaboration between them and this community crisis response, if there will be one. So we engaged with police, with EHS, with IES, with fire, and others. And then we also did some engagements where we hired two individual consultants who engaged generally with service providers and organizations serving people with lived and living experience to understand what crisis means to them, because crisis means different things to different people. So we sought to understand what type of crisis do they experience, what crisis means to them, how will they want to be served in times of crisis. And a professor in one of the universities in Halifax also did a study that I'm not sure if it's been published now, and the essence of the study was to understand from people with lived experience and people with living experiences, how do they want to be served when they are experiencing crisis. And the options were, do they want police responding to them when they have crisis? Do they want co-response, that is a civilian and police response? Or do they want non-police response? And the majority from the results of the study, majority went with non-police response when they are experiencing crisis. From the result of this, using the results of all these engagements, we then developed this model from the result that we had from the engagements. And the development of this model is such that there will be an intake partner, as we had from the engagement, that there will be an intake partner where people can phone into, and then the intake partner can then divert their need as appropriate, and also the engagement informed the evaluation plan. At the end of this service, because this is a pilot service that will run for 2 years. So at the end of the pilot, how do we demonstrate that this service, this pilot service has had an effect? How do we demonstrate learnings from the pilot? And also to inform the cost model for the service. So after this development, we are not just going ahead to implementation. We then had several other engagements, and I will say that one of it is what we are having here today, to provide the community or stakeholders back with the framework or the model that we have developed, to say that this is the model we have developed, this is how it will run. Then we want to take back comments to say, how do you see this? Is this responding to what we have had during the initial engagement? And what can we take out of these? What can we refine to make this service better? And after, when we are done with this refinement, like I said, this is where the stage we are now, and this is also what we are doing here today. And after the refinement, we will then launch the service for a period of 2 years, as it is a pilot, and then we will have another set of engagements using the results of the pilot. We'll have another set of engagements to further refine the service, if at that time it will be transiting into a more permanent service. So what are the expected outcomes of this model when it starts to run? It is expected that it will divert calls, non-emergent, non-criminal calls from police, so that our community organization can respond to these services, so that they can provide more appropriate, trauma-informed, culturally responsive responses to the crisis that the individuals are experiencing. Also, we expect that there will be improved outcomes for the individuals in crisis, because the responses will be better tailored to their needs, other than what the experiences and trainings of police may be able to offer them. And at the end of the day, we expect that there will be increased community trust and safety built within individuals. So I want to give us a bit of a summary on what we had during the engagement sessions that we had with different stakeholders. What were the results of those engagements that fed into the model that we are developing now? So one of it is that we had that the word crisis is a difficult term to define, and it varies from one individual to the other. Crisis is not a homogeneous term. It means different things to different people. We also had that there is an increased need for strong support for people experiencing intimate partner violence and gender-based violence. And as a result of that, this model has been developed to be able to respond to some sort of intimate partner violence and gender-based violence in situations that are non-emergent. Okay. Also, we had that the fear of negative outcome and a shared concern, that there is fear of negative outcome and a shared concern for safety in the heart of everyone involved in crisis, both those responding and those that are involved in the crisis. We had that assessing services should be a simple and straightforward means. It shouldn't be complicated to assess services that are needed, especially in times of crisis. We also had that an existing phone line should be used as the intake, other than reinventing the wheel and creating another phone line that may be difficult for people to remember in times of crisis. And an example that was given during the engagement was 211. That 211 can be used as the intake partner for the crisis diversion model. We were also told that there is a lack of long-term sustainable resources to mitigate crises, especially when we talk about housing, healthcare, mental health care, and transportation, that these are key challenges to people experiencing crisis. We had that the peer support is invaluable for people experiencing crisis, and harm reduction and cultural competency training should be key in the trainings that will be provided to the crisis responders. We also had concerns about how police will be involved in the crisis response model. and that there's a need to build awareness and clear trust about the scope and mandate of the services, such that there isn't expectations on things that this service will not be able to deliver. So I'll hand over to my colleague who will talk about the model that we have been designing.
Thank you. My name is Kara Evans, and as my introduction said, I have a background in policing. I spent 15 years in policing. So I was brought onto the program to really look at how we can integrate with police, especially through the 911 system. So through this program, we did bring on 211 as an intake service because they already provide intake services for the province for various social service access points. So I'll just walk through a little bit about our model from the 211 perspective. So right now, we do have an initial pilot area that we're not quite ready to launch publicly or to say publicly where we're going because we're still waiting to sign on with our service provider who will be doing the on-the-ground support. So the area that we're looking at is going to encompass HRP and RCMP jurisdictions because the idea of this is how many calls are we diverting, like Deli had mentioned, how many calls are we diverting, but also how many calls are we getting that would not have entered into police databases. So we really want to see how much we're collecting and where we're collecting it from, and making sure that we have that access to 211 where people feel comfortable that they're not going to get a police response. We'll be able to see and analyze if we're providing a service that people are actually accessing and is it actually diverting from police. We are looking at we are anticipating a medium to high call volume in the area that we are selecting. And as Ashton will speak, he will speak more to the types of calls that we will be hopefully diverting. The initial pilot for the service is still yet to be determined because, again, we need to sign on with the service provider for the ground, that will be the boots on the ground. Ideally, we're starting at about 12 to 14 hours a day for the first couple of months, and then we'll be launching into a 24-hour service because we're recognizing that a lot of the calls that we will be getting will be overnight when people are in a different sort of crisis. And as I said, 211 is our service provider. There will be 2 mobile crisis teams on the ground 24/7. Once we are 24/7. In addition to this program, what Ashton will speak to is we currently have a mobile team that operates in the evenings that supports those living in encampments. So that service and this crisis diversion program will be merged, but still with the specific supports. And there'll be crossover within the service provider on how that looks. The other thing that we are bringing in is no wrong door approach. So if someone is in crisis and if their cell phone does not work, because cell phones work on minutes, but if you have no minutes on your phone, you still have the opportunity to call 911 and get that access. So the idea that we're developing with our police dispatch is if someone is in crisis, they can call 911 and they can ask to be redirected to the crisis diversion line for a response from 211 and the mobile team. So this is kind of the model that we're actually looking at. So if a crisis event is being experienced, the individual has the option of calling 211, but also a third party can call on their behalf. You'll see in gray the areas where we're still being fleshed out, but ideally what we want is people to call 211 and not have to call 911. Once a call does come in, it comes into the Navigator program where an intake and assessment will occur. 211 will be asking for information to be collected, but it's completely consent-based. And in the event that through the assessment that it's determined that it actually needs to go to a different service provider or the individual needs to be transferred to 911 due to the extent or the circumstance that's occurring, it's consent-based to pass the information on. So nothing is collected or shared without consent of the person that we're speaking to. We are setting up a direct line between 211 and 911, so therefore we have that free flow of information that prevents someone from repeating their story multiple times. Then once through the intake and assessment of the 911 Navigator care team, they will make the determination of what kind of supports will the person receive. So they could resolve the crisis over the phone, or they dispatch the actual mobile team to that person, or refer to another service provider, because 211 is the provincial intake and has connections to the other service providers across the province, but more specifically in our jurisdiction that we're picking. Then once there is a crisis team dispatched, Ashton will go into more detail about what that looks like. And then he will also speak to the event resolution on what is the outcome that we're hoping to get for all of the individuals that are calling. So the 211 Community Navigator response, when a 211 Community Navigator receives a call, several outcomes are possible, as I stated, based on the intake and assessment. So like I said, they could provide support over the phone, dispatch to care, referral to FANS for the intimate partner and gender-based violence, and refer to other service providers. So one of the things that we did during our community consultation is we brought in service providers and talk about what this would look like and how we would integrate with other service providers across HRM. And referral to our IES. So IES is an Integrated Emergency Services, because HRP and RCMP are the police agencies of jurisdiction in HRM, and they all get dispatched from the same area or the same physical building. So we could make a referral back depending on the severity of the call, if there is a threat to violence or a threat to someone's safety in life. And again, to the provincial crisis line for mental health and addiction support. And Ashton will go into, if there is no supports, what can be done next.
So I'll admit, I'm not as sharp as my colleagues, so I do have my son's tablet with some notes just to keep me grounded so I don't rant. I know this is day 3. I can lift the mic. I know this is day 3 of the conference, so you don't want me ranting up here, so I got some notes on my tablet when I'm looking down, okay? So service eligibility. The mobile crisis, as Kara and Dele spoke to, they won't be responding to any active violence or threats involving weapons or situations where life is in immediate danger. Those kind of cases will be escalated up to 911 and emergency services. Instead, this team is designed to respond to non-violent crises, things like distress, disputes, perceived safety concerns, mental health or substance use issues. And I want to highlight that this service isn't necessarily just for the person that's in crisis, but if businesses or other service providers are witnessing somebody in crisis, they can call 211 to get this team dispatched, okay? So some examples of situations that the team will be responding to once dispatched. There's some items that you can see on the slides, and I understand that all of them, there's a spectrum of wellness checks. Like some wellness checks can be, you haven't heard from somebody in 7 days, and another wellness check can be, you want to check on the well-being of somebody. So of course, on the highest end of that spectrum, if it's an immediate risk to life, if it's violence involved, threats, weapons, it's going to 911. But for things like, checking on someone who's struggling but not in immediate danger, this team will be there, providing basic needs like food and clothing, talking with people who are threatening about suicide or self-harm, trying to de-escalate them, responding to, once again, mental health, substance use issues, and as Dele mentioned, supporting people with intimate partner violence situations, gender-based violence situations, once again, where there is no weapons or no immediate threat. And also helping when there are signs of overdose. Of course, whenever there's a sign of overdose, you call 911, get folks on site, but this team can help support the person or the people who are around that person while 911 is on the way. Oh, absolutely. The question was, is this team allowed to use naloxone? And the answer is yes, absolutely. So, who the team is? Who's this team made up out of? So, there'll be 2 vehicles. Each vehicle will have 2 trained responders, people with experience in crisis support, crisis de-escalation, some folks with lived experience themselves, and folks who have experience working with marginalized populations. Some training and preparation. You see a list there, but we're also going to ask for your feedback later around, how we can better this service. I know you have some questions. I promise we have a. Yes. Pardon me? Yeah, so marginalized populations, regarding the experience of the team. So this is a team who has worked with people who have mental health issues, people who have addiction issues, people who have, struggle with poverty, indigenous folks, African, Nova Scotian folks. Make sense? Thank you. So yeah, training and preparation. So team members, once again, will be trained in crisis de-escalation, nonviolent crisis intervention, mental health first aid, suicide prevention and intervention, what to do after the fact, anti-oppressive trauma-informed practices, and once again, specific trainings for intimate partner violence and gender-based violence. I see your hand raising up. That's okay.
So a lot of our people, they'll go into the cities.
Yep.
Stuff happens, this, that, and the other. And it's great that you have this first response, and
Mm-hmm.
that's fantastic, it's trauma-informed, it's amazing.
Yep.
But I see and feel there's a gap, because a lot of our people miss home,
Mm-hmm.
their resources at home. So in your project, have you compiled a list of support services coming from the First Nations communities that you can refer our people back home?
Yeah, so this was one of the questions at one of our last slides. We actually want your feedback on that. We're still developing this model, so this would be helpful. We are planning on having some cultural competency trainings for specific, 2 indigenous communities, African Nova Scotian communities as well. That's something that we are 100% in tune with and know that we have to add to this model in order for it to be effective. Yep. Absolutely. This team is going to be diverse for sure. Different ethnic backgrounds, 100%. Absolutely. Great question. So what the team actually does on site. So once the team's on site, crisis de-escalation is the main thing that this team's going to be doing. Of course, safety planning, transportation to a safe location if people need. I mentioned basic needs, client advocacy, and also connecting to other services and other resources. So this was the slide I kept talking about. So there are a few questions here, and we could do a mix. If you have questions, we'll take them. But there are also a few questions here that we kind of want your feedback on. So, and we're gonna grab some notes. You got the mic? I'm gonna come back over here with some mics.
So just to be
Sorry,
clear,
one second. I'm so sorry. Do all 3 of these mics work so that we can all take test? Here's one. Deli, does that one work for you? And can I take this one? I can stay here.
Just to be clear, with regards to the support services coming from the 13 communities throughout Mi'kma'ki, throughout Nova Scotia, a lot of the times I find that everybody's filtered through the Friendship Centre in Halifax.
For sure.
And that place might not be suitable, but find out what support services are in each available community, to contact people, and make the referrals back home if you can.
Thank you for that, because you're absolutely right. I think, when working with Indigenous folks who are within the city, it's almost like a second nature to just say, hey, Friendship Center, let's refer you to the Friendship Center. So thank you for that.
Just a question over here. Thinking about in New Brunswick, in Elsipogtog, they have a mobile crisis team similar to what you're explaining. I don't know if you guys heard about it or not, but they they'll have a group that will go into if someone's having a crisis, or they'll go and provide that support within their community. I don't know if you guys heard about it, but I highly recommend reaching out to their health center and finding out some of the information on how they provide that service for their community.
Which health center was that?
Elsie Buktuk?
In New
New
Brunswick.
Brunswick.
Okay. And
ELSIPOGTOG. ELSIPOGTOG.
it'll be good to know how they're dispatched. If it's a direct line they call, or if
They're all partners. Someone here, I don't know if he's still here. I don't see him anymore. Might be, but they have they go and when they have a crisis or something, anything, even with people who are thinking about suicide or whatever, they'll go in and sometimes before the police officers. I forget the name of it. Is it the mobile crisis team? IndigiWatch. So they go into their community they're in the community and they call them all hours, stuff like that.
okay, amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We can help you with a contact. We were hoping to get them here as well to talk about what they were able to do, but they weren't available, so. The what? Yes, we have some, the buddies here, and we're hoping.
Contact would be helpful. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hi. So my question was, I know like you guys are just building the model right now. Tentatively, what would be your response time for people? Because I know something that is not necessarily an urgent crisis can turn into an urgent crisis
Absolutely.
in minutes. So ideally, what would be your response time for your area?
Thank you for the question. So right now we are working through some tabletop exercises with this 211 and our potential service provider for the boots on the ground. And we are working through different various scenarios on what a call would look like, type of the information that we're getting. And what we're doing is we're going through those calls and we're prioritizing them from a 0, 1, 2, 3 approach. So if it's a priority 0 type call, that's a referral back to police because there's an immediate danger there. If it's a priority 1, we're still working out the dispatch times, but so I don't want to necessarily say today that we have that nailed down. But if someone is in crisis, ideally we're looking at around 45 minutes to an hour response. So if it's someone that's in immediate crisis, and we need a response from 0 to 15 minutes, that at this point is going to be a referral back to to police because they have a quicker response time, they have more availability. We will have the 3 teams. We have the 2 that is traveling in the jurisdiction, and then we have the 1 team that will be working within the encampments. They're going to be cross-trained, so if there is support that needs to go back and forth to fill those time gaps, they're going to be cross-trained to be able to cross over to help each other out. What we're looking to try to do is have a call resolved that day, whether that is within an hour, within a couple of hours, depending on the nature of the call.
Yeah.
It will be 24 hours starting in the new year. Oh, no, staff. It's going to be staffed. So 211 will be ramping up to be a 24-hour service like they are in other jurisdictions such as in Toronto and Ottawa and Edmonton. The vehicles will be staffed by staff people, hired staff, which again will be available 24/7 once we're able to ramp up to that full scale.
Sorry, I don't have my ideally, when is your launch date of this program?
We're aiming for September. We're just waiting for a couple signatures to be able to to be able to confirm those dates.
What are you kind of forecasting as your amount of staff you're going to be using?
So starting out, we're going to have 2 people per van, 2 vans on the road at any given time, or at the time of service. So when we go to launch, it's only going to be, say, 12 hours, because the service provider needs to staff up to full 24-hour complement. So we'll have a 12-hour window of 4 people on the road, 2 in each van. And then we have from 4 p.m. to midnight, we have the encampment team that would be available to support if their work allows for that support.
So you'll have about 3 shifts in a 24-hour period.
Yes, eventually we'll have 4 shifts? No, 12. Well, it's going to be broken up in 12 hours, so it'll be a 12-hour shift, 12-hour shift.
Any other questions folks may have, or any responses to some of the questions on the slide? I'm getting the nudge behind me. Okay. No, for sure. Okay. 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 For sure. Yeah. I'm just saying thank you, sorry.
There was no question.
No, I just said that there's, we'd like to follow up afterwards, and we know everybody's tired, so I think it's a good chance for us to, probably not today, but we will get a group together, we'll look at those questions, we'll bring it back to you, so we'll have a little bit more of a process with respects to that. I did see a hand up, no, and if there's no other hands up, I'm going to hand it over to Annie and say thank you very much. You want to go up? And then we'll follow up on this, because I know that there's a lot of interest, especially on wellness checks and support for individuals who are on crises and not looking directly to the police for those. So we'll definitely have more conversations on that.
Thank you very much for being here and enjoying us today. Interesting conversations, which is the theme. We've had great conversations and dialogue for the last few days. And okay. Oh my goodness, come back. Yep, come back. So on behalf of the ladies, come on up, ladies. On behalf of the Nova Scotia Police.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yep. I didn't see them. They're way in the back. So, in saying that, I just want to, I think back in the last few days and all the former nationhoods that I've attended as a leader. The conversations are always interesting and the dialogue very interesting and much needed as leaders, chief and councils, grand council across Nova Scotia, that we come together throughout the year and certain times of the year. We come together and we share what would help us or what we can do things better to help better our lives and, more importantly, the lives of our children. So these conversations and these gatherings are extremely important. It brings us to the end of our Justice, Mental Health and Addictions Conference. And we've had, again, wonderful few days. And before I close and we close, I would like to thank Kim K&O and the Assembly of Chiefs for inviting me to be an MC this week. And I've loved it. So if you have an event and if you have a conference and you're looking for an MC, get a hold of me. You know, no problem. I'll do it. And I want to thank you to staff, the guest speakers, chiefs, counselors, the cooks, the staff, the wait staff, for the good food because you fed us all very well. And in saying that, we're going to do some final prizes. After we draw for the prizes, I'm going to invite G. Sagmao to come up and close our conference. So get ready, get your tickets ready. You know what? I have to look out for my big brother. He was there with a bunch of tickets down there, and now he's gone. Oh, well. Yeah. Are we ready? We're ready. You got to be here to win them. So are we ready? 795 293. Ah, damn. 09. 795 293 09. Who's got that? Oh, awesome. We have to verify. And make it official. You got her. That is a good thing. And how many more do we have? 3 more? 2 more? Okay. 2 more. Oh, I see that they're good prizes too. That's awesome. Whoa. 795 292. Who's left? 77. 795 292 77. Redraw. Seven nine five 292 61. Who got it? Philippa. Yay. Oh. We got her. She got it. Awesome. Here you go. One more. Last one. This is the last prize. Seven nine five. It's almost like my old phone number. 795 292 92. Redraw. Blue. 795 292 66. No, I didn't call that one. 795 292 66. Buster, is it you? Redraw. Okay. If nobody wins, I'm keeping the prize. 795 292 69. Redraw. Okay. 795 292 71. Nobody? You're kidding. Oh, wait. Hey, Carrie! Yay! In saying that, thank you, everyone. Hope you enjoyed this conference. Oh, we got to check. I believe, Carrie. I believe, I trust you. You got it. It is it.
Was always taught that it was the devil's work, stuff like that. So looking from back then, just over 30 years ago, compared to where things are now, how our children are born hearing those songs. Our children hear those songs while in their mother's wombs. Our children are brought up with ribbon skirts, with ribbon shirts, things like that. They're brought up with identity. They know who they are as Mi'kmaq. When I was a teenager, I didn't know what being Mi'kmaq was. And so it's an honor to be able to still carry on that tradition. And you talk about the meaning of that song, how it really, really, really helped our people, not just in Mi'kmaq, right across North America. Lots of times when we sing that song, or lots of times when we travel to different parts of the country, whether if it's Minnesota, Albuquerque, or in Haudenosaunee territory, they ask us, because they know we're Mi'kmaq, to sing that song, because that song brings them healing as well too. So we're always honored to sing that. They'll even make room for it at powwows and stuff like that, and ask us to sing that song. So it's an honor still to be able to share. I know everybody's ready to go, but during this song, I ask you to pray to the Creator in your own way. I ask that everybody have a safe trip home, and it's a big thing to leave your families behind for the week, and then I hope it was a great few days, and it so much pride, and it's a journey of healing. And so I ask you to pray to the Creator in your own way, in your own words, as what's most important is that our words are genuine and they're from the heart. There's no right or wrong way to pray. And I'm going to keep the song short. I'm not going to do a full 4 push-ups. I respect everybody's time. I respect our elders. And those elders who have a hard time standing, you don't have to stand during this song. So don't feel obligated. I know you would if you could. So I'm going to keep it short, and I'll just do 1 push-up. Walal, and thank you. Getting me dead on an edge, don't tell you no tig, nigga max tu, ke ma weed on edge. Getting me dead on an edge, don't wet a big salty. Nega max tu, ke a bog na mar oltenage, ke a bog na mar oltenage, dan gisuk teligaluk, se ula sit gamu, hey a hey o. Hey oh hey hi hey oh hey oh hey hi 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 hey oh. Hey oh hey hi hey oh hey oh hey hi 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 hey oh. Wala lang gizuk.
Hello,